nice to see my people. My tribe, I had one of my friends say, we're her tribe, and that you all are, so thank you. As I woke up in the middle of the night with back pain, I went to our bathroom and woke up to my husband saying, the ambulance is on its way. I couldn't feel my legs. I started panicking. I hyperventilated. I was terrified. I saw my legs, but I couldn't feel them. And this was just the beginning of hospital stays, doctor visits, and even home nurses. The lower half of my body and my mind had a disconnect. I remember looking at the stairs in our home, but not really understanding how to get up them. I had a visiting nurse come 3 times a week. And as I held onto my kitchen counter, she taught me to tap my foot. I couldn't even do that without help. With advice of the doctor and the nurses, they gave me a walker. And I used that walker. I had to use the walker, sometimes even just to go to the bathroom. But I took the walker to a meeting I had at a church that we used to attend to. And I was sitting at a meeting, and the man says to me, geez, Melissa, what sin did you commit that now you have this physical ailment? Wait, what? What sin did I commit because I have a physical ailment? I was stunned. In fact, I was speechless. I didn't say anything. But this wasn't the first time questions like this had been answered or questioned. Actually, this is what the disciples did to Jesus in John chapter 9. But before we dive into our text, I want to just give a little backstory of John chapter 8. I'm nervous. Jesus went to the temple to teach, and it turned quickly into a debate. Jesus told them that he was the Son of Man, and this proclamation angered the religious leaders. He also made other I am statements, and this angered those leaders enough that they wanted to stone Jesus. Jesus had to sneak away. It actually says Jesus slipped away and hid. The very next verse starts, as he went along. As he went along? How was Jesus not freaking out? That's what I want to know. He had just finished this heated discussion, and he felt the need to go and hide. But now he's just going along? He seems unaffected by his surroundings. He's cool, calm, and collected. And many times I've asked Jesus to make me more like him. And today is a day I wish I had cool, calm, and collected, because I am nervous. Okay, let's start with John chapter 9, verse 1. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned? Was it this man or his parents that he was born blind? The law of Moses believed that the sins of the father would be passed down to the children. Exodus 20, verse 5 reads, punishing the children to the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation. Exodus is found in the Old Testament. It's the 2nd book of the Bible, and the first 5 books of the Bible reflect the traditional Jewish Torah. I searched the Bible to help me define generational curse. I couldn't find anything. What I did find in my research is that oftentimes when a passage is unclear, they use it to support false teaching. And I believe Jesus died on the cross for all of us. But in Jesus' time, this is what the Jewish believers believed. The disciples were recognizing how different Jesus actually was from the laws. Sorry. Okay. The disciples were recognizing how radically different Jesus was from the religious leaders and the law. So they asked Jesus a great question. Rabbi, who sinned? Jesus responded, neither, nor his parents or this man. This happened so that the works of God could be displayed. God had a purpose for this blind man. As I prepare for this message and others, I've asked the Lord many times to help me say what he wants me to say. But what I love about when I do that is he always gives me a takeaway. something I needed to learn, something I needed to take into my life. So I have 4 takeaways, and I'd like to share those with you this morning. Number 1, Jesus cares about our weakness. Jesus took time to heal the man. He saw the need, and he stopped. And back in these days, physical ailments didn't come with disability insurance. They were usually become beggars, homeless. They were overlooked by many. But Jesus met him there. He knows where you are. Each of us have our own God story. Jesus doesn't heal us in the same way. It's unique to each of us. And Jesus doesn't want to just heal us physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Is there something Jesus wants to heal in you? Takeaway number 2, blind obedience. So we've been reading Water for the Way to prepare us for Easter. And all of our series have been about water. We've had polluted water, bewitched water, water divide, and today, spit bath. Spit bath? How many of us had your mom or dad lick their finger and wipe something off your face? Yes, gross, right? And when I asked my kids if I'd ever done that to them, they were both so disgusted. But this is exactly what Jesus did. And in verse 4, as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am light of the world. And after saying this, Jesus spit on the ground and made mud with saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. In Hebrew, Siloam means sent. Jesus sent the man to the pool. This pool is where the people that would come in from the journey would wash before they entered the temple. I can't imagine that water being very clean. And the text doesn't really give us a clear understanding of where Jesus found the man. Was he close to the pool, or did the man have to travel far to get there? We don't really know. But the good news is he went. He literally had blind obedience to Jesus, and he went to the pool. Sometimes when we want answers or guarantees, I have to ask, will Jesus be enough? And sometimes when I ask him questions, I want a deeper understanding. And sometimes he says, not yet. And other times he just says no and closes the door. And he asked me, am I willing to have blind obedience? Takeaway number 3, we must fear God, not man. Sorry. I think I have to do that so you guys can see how nervous I actually am, so you all see my handshake. The next 27 verses are filled with legalism, interrogation, rejection, doubts, and denials. The man's neighbors were skeptical. Verses 8 through 12, just to summarize, they saw this man who could now see, and they were asking, is this the man? Is this a man? No, it's not him. He only looks like him. But then the man, he insists, yeah, hey, it's me. Yeah. But then they take him to the Pharisees. Were they afraid of Jesus? Were they afraid of the religious leaders? Why did they take him? In verse 16 through 18, some of the Pharisees would say, the man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. And others asked, well, if he were full of sin, how could he perform such miracles? So they became divided. And then they looked to the man. So what do you have to say? And the man says, he's a prophet. They still didn't believe him, so they summoned his parents. Verse 19 and 20. Is this your son? Was he born blind? Parents respond, we don't know. So I pause there and I think, why is not anyone rejoicing in this miracle? This blind man from birth can see, and no one is rejoicing. You would think they'd throw a party, but no, they have a controversy. All of them missed the joy of the miracle. And being a mother myself, I judged the reactions of his parents. But then I thought about it. Remember verse 2? Who sinned, the man or his parents? I come to the conclusion the parents were probably already judged. They were probably already an outcast. And they were labeled and sent away from the synagogue. And they were living with shame and condemnation that they really didn't understand. And I can't imagine living with the shame that I did something, I sinned, that caused hurt in my children. I can't imagine. But in verse 22, no wonder, says his parents were afraid. If they acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, if they acknowledged that this was a healing done by God, by this man, they would probably be kicked out of the synagogue again. And they feared the religious leaders. And by doing this, they denied Jesus. The Pharisees were waiting for the coming Messiah, yet Jesus didn't fit their mold. He didn't appear the way they expected. They rejected him. They denied him. They even called him a sinner for making mud on the Sabbath. And Jesus didn't actually break the commandment as God intended. He only broke the commandment of the religious leaders. Jesus healed the man. He saw the need. He wasn't bound to man's laws. He performed this miracle, even knowing the consequences. We must follow God's commandments rather than man's tradition. The religious leaders were so stuck on the judgment. They were the ones now blind. When I was just a kid, my brother and I would be playing outside, and it was a rule that when the streetlights came on, we were to go home. And this, although this was just a rule to us kids, the light of the streetlights gave me security and safety of home. And in verse 5, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. In verse 39, Jesus says, for judgment I have come to this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Light is a symbol of holiness, goodness, knowledge, wisdom, grace, and hope. And by contrast, darkness is associated with evil and hopelessness. Jesus came to this world to show love and forgiveness, to share hope and freedom. He doesn't leave us in our confusion. He doesn't abandon us. So who will have the last word in your life? Will it be God, or will it be the religious leaders, like the man's parents? Will you choose God and the path he has for you? My last takeaway is grow through what you go through. See, the blind man started this chapter as a beggar, one rejected by neighbors and religious leaders. But verse 38 tells us he's a believer. He calls Jesus Lord. Notice the progression. It didn't just happen in an instant. Verse 11 and 12 tells us the neighbors questioned him, and he responds, the man they called Jesus. He wasn't even sure if that was Jesus who healed him. He didn't actually see him. Then the Pharisees in verse 17 and 18, the blind man answered, he's a prophet. So he started to understand that this healing was actually inspired by God, but he was still seeking, still confused, still asking questions. Jesus went from someone the man just heard about to being a prophet. The second time religious leaders summoned him, verse 27, I told you already, and you do not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become a disciple too? He was asking the Pharisees if they wanted to become a disciple too. He was claiming that he maybe wants to be a disciple, or he is a disciple. I'm not sure. Verse 30 through 32, the man answered, now this is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, only godly people who does his will. He's almost saying this in a sarcastic tone, I think. Now, this is remarkable. I have kids. I know that was sarcasm. Right? Okay, but he knows the religious leaders shunned him. These are probably things he heard. He wasn't allowed to go in the temple, but he probably heard this. So I think he was being a little sarcastic. He knew the religious leaders didn't have the power to heal him. And then he says, nobody has ever heard of the opening of the eyes of a man born blind. If this man weren't from God, he could do nothing. To this, the Pharisees replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? They threw him out. The man is now claiming that Jesus must be from God. How did the Pharisees respond? They threw him out. Verse 35 and 38. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. He went to find him. Jesus went to find him. He didn't just leave him. He wasn't abandoned. He wasn't alone. Jesus asked the man, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? Tell me. I want to believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. Remember, this is the first time he's actually seeing Jesus. In fact, the one who is speaking to you is he. The man said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. And when I picture worshiped him, I think he got on his knees and said, Lord, I believe. The man grew into a relationship with God. Jesus didn't leave him abandoned, rejected. Jesus looks for us too. He doesn't leave us abandoned. He heals us. And if we feel broken, alone, he's looking for you. He gives us the light to those that ask him. I was determined to get better. I prayed even though I was afraid. I prayed for healing. And as I look back, I never really doubted that God was with me. In fact, I felt his presence every time I got up to walk. But this went on for 6 months. The doctors really never gave me a diagnosis. And when I tell others my story, my God story, some will ask, well, it sounds like you had a stroke. It sounds like it's lupus. Do you have lupus in your family? Maybe it's MS. Do you have MS? Maybe you have MS. I don't know. Well, aren't you mad? Aren't you discouraged that they couldn't give you an answer? I proudly say now, no. I truly believe that God healed me. He protected me from something really bad. I still struggle physically at times. My left side will go numb, and there's days I can't walk as far as I did the day before. I probably really never wear those 4-inch heels again. And I still have the walker. It's in our bedroom behind the door. And I don't have it to keep it because I think I'm going to need it again. I have it because it's there to remind me God healed me. So to answer the man's question, it wasn't sin. It was my God story. It was my miracle story. What is it that God wants to heal in you? Is it something physical, emotional, or spiritual? He's with us today, just like he was with the blind man many years ago. And maybe you're stuck between the spit bath and the pool. I was there for a really long time. I wanted a guarantee. I wanted Jesus to say, okay, if this is where I'm going, you're going to do this, right? I wanted him to give me a guarantee. In fact, I remember going to Pastor Leary several years ago, many years ago. Why is it that God gave Noah a blueprint? I want a blueprint. But when Jesus says no, will he be enough? But my question that kept me stuck was I worried I wasn't enough. Lord, really, am I enough? Do you really want to call me to do this? You really want me to teach women? Are you in a situation where you have to choose God's way? Maybe over a job, maybe over a family member, maybe friends. What does God want to change in you? These altars are open. I remember praying many times of what God wanted to do in my life. And I never really thought that this would be it. But he's been faithful and makes it so clear to me. He hasn't given me a guarantee, but I see my future in a way that I didn't before. So as Pastor Stephen comes, and if you want to come and kneel because he has something he wants to heal, I pray that you'll come and you'll let him, because he's waiting, just like he did for me. He'll do it for you.